Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're covering TV shows from week to week, introducing all of you to something to watch, recommendations along the way as well, and some insight and camaraderie, hopefully. Currently on the podcast, we are covering two shows, Dexter Resurrection, which is wrapping up this very week with its season finale, and a lot of listeners turning up for the most recent episodes of that on our podcast feed. So thanks for listening in. But of course, on these episodes, we're covering Alien Earth. We're more than halfway through this season, a very short season of TV. As usual with these episodes, I'm joined by Darren.
Hello there, Victor. Yeah, I'm up to date on Dexter Resurrection as well. So yeah, looking forward to the finale this week. But this episode of Alien was so good. So yeah, looking forward to having a chat.
Yes, I can't wait to talk to you about it. It's so funny to see this episode. And once again, just looking at the social reaction and how people have turned on the show and had kind of mixed feelings about it. Of course, all those haters love this episode because they're like, this is Alien. It's on a spaceship. There's an alien slashing people. So I'm like, you can't make a TV show out of this, people. Although maybe you could. I have a alternate season one of this show that maybe could have been a pilot for that show. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe this was originally where the show started. And then maybe as they started breaking the story, they're like, well, we're way more interested in what's happening on Earth. So let's just skip all this stuff. One more thing before we get into the breakdown. Just want to mention that I had mentioned over and over again, there was this box office seasonal recap. The holiday came and went. We went to barbecues. My daughter's school started. Isona was hung out with us. We actually were out on Long Island with her family, and they hadn't watched Dexter. So anyway, that episode that I said was going to happen on a Monday never came, but I did record the box office recap for the season. And I'm just going to stick it on this episode. So if anyone who's still interested in that, stick around after Darren and I end our conversation. I'll go right into that box office commentary, which I already recorded. So if it sounds like the conversation's wrapping up, do stick around. I'll just glue it onto the end using the magic of digital editing.
Well, that's good. I've been looking forward to hearing you talk about that. So yeah, I'll listen to this episode.
Great. Perfect. You can listen to it again in real time and then again. Okay. So this episode, Alien Earth, called In Space, No One, which of course is a reference back to the tagline on the original Alien, In Space, No One Can Hear You Scream. This one is directed again by Noah Hawley. He's written all of these with a writing staff, but he's the primary writer on all of these scripts. However, he is the director of the pilot episode and this one. So these are the two of this season that he's directed and directs very well. I mean, he likes this. This is difficult filmmaking, especially on a TV schedule. And this is very impressive filmmaking.
I've got to agree. Yeah, I think I sent you a text when I was watching it and I was like, Noah Hawley is a boss at directing this episode. There's things going on left, right, and center. There's multiple characters. You always know what's going on. And the way the storylines cross over, I was very impressed with that. And also the action, the sound design, everything. It was, it really hit me.
Yeah, it's interesting too to once again see these reactions. I read a very negative review of basically had made their decision about what's wrong with Alien Earth. This is a critic who wrote this and saying this is what's wrong with taking the Breaking Bad template and putting it into a science fiction show where when you run out of story, you just introduce a whole bunch of characters and you have everybody sit around and talk about their personal problems. And I was kind of irritated by reading that review, by the way, because first of all, they were commenting on last week's episode. And first of all, when I see last week's episode, I'm thinking they're setting things up, right? This isn't going to be the show from now on. It's just this married couple arguing about the right decision to make. One of them wants to leave the island, the other one doesn't, something like that. That's just one scene in the show. Doesn't mean the rest of the show is going to be that way. And second of all, it's okay to tap the brakes and set things up for the future, because even in last week's episode, which a lot of people didn't love, I think there's a lot of things that are being set up for the finale. This is a short season, so you kind of reset in the middle of the season to set things up. And of course, fun, the most entertaining aspect of that review was this criticism that, like, we're not even going to have anything sci-fi. There's no more plot in the show anymore. And one episode later, we have an episode that is on a spaceship and it's 100% plot. So don't judge too harshly, people. There is a shape to the story. One episode does not dictate an entire show. Be patient. Don't get me wrong. I have seasons of Fargo, for example, where I got to the last episode and I'm like, okay, that kind of went off the rails for me. So I will grant that Holly may not have a great end game for this season, possibly, but let's wait until the season's over before we make that commentary. That's my general opinion. And by the way, I've been enjoying this a lot. And again, we just talked last week about how the production design and the cast is doing such the heavy lift here. Again, incredible set. I mean, just the production design for this film, I call it a film, it is, of this episode of TV, which is over an hour long, basically a mini movie, is again just absolutely incredible.
So incredible. And I'm looking at the opening titles again. Every episode, the opening titles are showing us something different. And we see the hallways of the ship,
yes,
which really hark back to the first film. And the hallways are just in that kind of white or fluorescent lighting. And then they flash red. Mm-hmm. And so then you're going down a red hallway, and it really spoke to me like as if the chest burster was coming out of a chest. It just looked like a cavity as you're going through the ship. And yeah, very evocative.
Yeah, really well said, and really interesting as well. I just saw that documentary last year about the making of Eye-lien. There's quite a few of them, but the one now I can't remember the name of it. Remembrance, I think it's called, but a strange name for it. But it's available on Amazon Prime. You can watch it anywhere. And there's all this behind the scenes footage of, you see Ridley Scott himself being his own camera operator. And this is before Steadicam. And you think about that camera floating through those hallways in the first Eye-lien film. And just like you mentioned, it's like a body that we're working inside of, the way that the alien is working inside this corpse, or I guess not a corpse, but this living body. It's like the way that these people are crawling around inside this ship. They're insects in an ant colony of their own, but also just so the very evocative of that. And also, like you mentioned, that Noah Hawley mentions specifically that they took the original schematics between the actual blueprints they had from the 1979 movie, plus just watching the films and literally mapping out, like you were playing Zork or something, and drawing the little map on the side of, what the map of this layout is. So the ship is exactly one of the ships from 19. So they're basically replicating the ship that we saw in the 1979 film. Not only in its production design, the geography of the action is all within this constructed space. So very authentic. And of course, it really pays off in making you feel like you're inside this ship the way you are when you're watching a submarine movie, and you know exactly how far you need to get from one room to the other because you know the full logistics of the space. And very cool, very cool. And
I just love that. And they could also almost cut scenes from the first Eye-lien film into this. And it would be, the continuity would match perfectly because of the set design. It reminds me of the end of that Star Wars Rogue One film, where it almost went back to the same sets as the original Star Wars, and it just was seamless in terms of the production design, the uniforms, everything. And it's just it's really nostalgic, but also feels very authentic to the world too.
Right. It's so cool. But the one thing that is very funny and is, glaringly something that is out of step now is all this analog technology, which I wish they would explain in some way. Not that you have to explain it, but of course they've gone full analog, just like they want to be totally true to the original Eye-lien film, since you're setting in the exact same timeline. But the idea that this computer requires a keyboard, that the font, the detail of the font, and not only that, but when Morrow's looking at the security tapes, I'm like, look, they shot F1 with 8K cameras. These cameras are not 8K. This is like, VHS quality, video quality here. So he's like looking at the screen, being like, "Who are you?" And he's trying to guess who the saboteur might be. Of course, he can't like enhance, which is baloney anyway. But that whole idea of zooming in on the footage, they just don't have that resolution there to check it out. But what happened in the past 100 years that our technology has gotten so crappy? Same question for Blade Runner, by the way.
Just the square TVs. I kind of miss them.
Just the old tube TVs. That's all. No flat screens. In space, only analog works. This episode primarily, obviously, incredible alien action. But beyond that, we get Morrow's backstory, what led him to not only the spaceship and this kind of vendetta that he's on right now. So it makes his character much more interesting, much more complex. This is really a lot of character development for that character and makes him more complex. He's not just an evil guy who is mindlessly single-minded. I guess that's kind of contradictory, but it's not like just single-minded and evil. It's that he has a reason to want revenge in a way. And there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. And I don't think he's weighing that. But you see how he became this character that he's now.
Oh, I just love it. And it goes back to the opening scene of the series where we saw Morrow and we thought he was completely heartless.
Right.
We suspected he was a robot, and we suspected that he was, maybe the enemy of the piece. Whereas this episode completely reframes everything. Yep. And we are right on his side, and we can see his hurt and his heartbreak of being away from his daughter who has died without him. Mm-hmm. His whole family is gone because he's been on this mission that is incredibly important to him for some reason, because Yutani pulled him out of poverty, gave him a new arm, and has given him a purpose to live. And just to see the tears on his face, he's not a robot at all. Right. Even though he's part cyborg, he's human. And to really be on his side was something special, I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you see, and very well set up, that I had mentioned that in last week's episode when he's talking to Slightly and he's remembering his daughter, it didn't just seem like a manipulation. He seemed very wistful thinking about his daughter. So it's this weird thing where he's like grooming Slightly. He definitely plans to use him. And simultaneously, he has this paternalistic affinity for this younger character, someone who would be, approximately the age of his daughter the last time he had seen her. So there's that very conflicted emotion that he must be feeling at that time. But at the same time, you think about this guy. I can't even imagine this situation where you literally are going to disappear for 65 years. And the idea is your family will be taken care of, that's the price you pay. But you'll know when you wake up that, you may have grandkids, you may have spawned this successful multiple generations, and you sacrificed your relationship with them, but you get all these things to find out that she died. And it's just like he is lost, first of all. And then after that horrible revelation, he at least has this mission and this crew, and he loses the crew. And then to find out that it was all caused by this saboteur, but of course, at the impetus of Cavalier. So now he is dead set on seeking revenge for all of this, right? And you also understand why, of course, he's single-mindedly committed to even retrieving this technology, even if it's going to exterminate the human race or something. He's like Heart of Darkness. Who am I thinking of? The character in Up the River, Kurtz. He's like Kurtz. Yeah, he's like Kurtz, right? Because he's just like he's around the bend at this point, and it's his own twisted logic that if it's an insane world, and then he'll just be the most insane of them all by committing, or potentially unleashing this horrible blight on humanity.
And I'm a bit sus about the motivations of the company. I mean, the note that he got saying that his daughter died in a fire, there's no details. Mm-hmm. It's just at about the time, I think she was 18, so she's just about to start
Mhm.
college. And I don't know about you, but I had to pause it to read the letters from her. And one of the letters was about her going to college, and she said she wanted to go to one of the traditional colleges like Harvard rather than the company-owned colleges, the Utani-owned colleges that were going to pay for her whole education. So the fact that she was thinking about going a different way to what the company wanted, and then all of a sudden she's disappeared, I think is very fishy.
Yeah, I think it's very strange that she died, but at the same time, I'm not sure. And in general, I do agree that I felt the same thing. But I just when I try to reason that out, I think like what would be the upside of that? He probably would be asleep that entire period of time. So maybe she was just it's possible she was just a troublemaker back on Earth and they got rid of her. That's a possibility. But it is yeah, I mean just the it just seems that this, and you see the strain, and this goes back to that first Alien film as well. You see the strain on the crew of being on this mission. And it seems that everybody who wakes up 65 years into this mission is like, why the hell did I do this? Especially when they're getting docked their part of their pay for every little behavioral infraction they have. So I guess that's just I guess in the future, it's no better.
Yeah, and it possibly explains why a lot of these crew are loose units in the way that
yes.
they behave, and the lax security measures that they take, and there's just the fact that there's a bit of chaos going on in this ship, and poor old Morrow as a security officer has to deal with them.
It's interesting that he was sleeping at the beginning. He gets awakened later. I guess he could have slept longer if they had needed him. But while he was sleeping, while you were sleeping, he was there's one of these eggs have hatched, more than one, right? Two. And one of them was the captain. The captain is now dead because they tried to remove it. And of course, we know the acid cut through his neck, bled through his neck. So now I forget her name, but I have it.
So the acting captain was getting it on with the actual captain. Is that right? So the actual captain, was that Bronsky?
Well, it's not the captain that she was getting it on with because the captain actually dies with when they try to remove that. But there's the other one who still has it attached. And she inherited that position, but she eventually. I like how first Morrow threatens to take control from her if she can't keep it together. But there's that moment where with the ticks, where they're trying to remove the ticks from the youngest crew member's heart. And it kills them both. These doctor and scientists, not the sharpest tools in the shed here. No food in the lab. All. No food in the lab. So yeah, eventually he takes control of the ship, but at this point it's too late. So we find out, we discover this crew. Obviously, we find all this backstory leading up to the events of this particular show and the very first episode. But also we find out a lot about the creatures. That's a whole other discovery here.
Oh, there's so much about the creatures. And just on the crew, I was going to say, one of the things that I really loved about the first film was the way that the dialogue was all overlapping. The crew were all talking about, you came in the middle of conversations, you don't really know what they're about, then you left to see other conversations. And this happened in this episode. People would be walking through doors in the middle of a conversation and you're just catching snippets of it. I think it really gives the whole crew life. It gives all the characters a backstory, even if you don't know it, if you don't catch it, you're into the story because it just feels like things are constantly happening in the background and you're not privy to everything. And also some of the crew are asleep, some are awake, some crew don't even know each other because they're on different shifts.
Right.
And they don't even know where each other's sleeping sometimes. They don't even know where the pods are. So they have no relationship at all. And it's just so exciting seeing all the crew interact.
Yeah, and it seems like there's even some folks that were supposed to be getting woken up that maybe we never even got that far, or did we lose the rest of that crew? Because it seemed like there was a whole conversation about waking up the rest of the crew. So is that all of them, or there's maybe some that are still frozen?
I think there was, I think that they were kind of worked in shifts as well, and the characters that we did get to know of, like the engineer and his apprentice, was cool. Also, I'm Mr. Tang. What's
Mhm.
going on with old Mr. Tang?
I don't know. They make,
Um,
they've spent a lot of time, especially on his creepy predilections, for him to just disappear from the show. I mean, he definitely died in this, right? Because the alien got him. So yeah, I'm not sure why they characterized him that way. It didn't seem to have any other payoff.
did he die? I saw him scream. Did we actually see him die? I don't know.
Well, someone said that the alien had gotten to Tang. I mean, I don't know if they saw the body, so maybe it's possible that he escaped. The
Yeah,
alien's
it's a
like,
bit
"Hey, I'm a
funny.
creeper too. I like to do a little. I'm really
My
good at
God.
peeping toming."
I was sure that he was an android as well. Just the
Mhm.
fact that he was looking over that one particular woman while she was sleeping. It's like, come on. So he's just a creeper. That's all he is.
That's it. He's just a creeper. Oh, a couple interesting details here. I don't know if he's a fan of Severance. He probably is, Noah Hawley. But to have this scientist is played by the same actress who played Dr. Ragabi in Severance. And she had, she's eating in the lab. And in Severance, she's always eating, constantly eating whenever she's around. She's always got junk food around. In this case, it was just a sandwich, but the water bottle, the water bottle, how disgusting.
Oh my God. As soon as I went to work, I had to wash out my water bottle. That's the first thing I did. Everybody has these water bottles these days.
Sitting around.
Everybody needs to see this scene.
Let's talk about the creatures for a little bit. What do you think is going on with the tick things that it's able to open the container? These things are intelligent. That's kind of a twist.
It's yeah. I mean, it all comes down to the eyeball, the Eye-lien.
Eye-lien, I
Whether
like it.
that was communicating with the ticks or whether it was
Mhm.
communicating with the scientists, I'm not sure. Whether it was distracting the scientists so the ticks could get out, or whether it sees the ticks as an enemy to itself. I don't know. It's very interesting. I still don't know the perspective of the eye and what's going on with there, but those ticks are disgusting. And the fact that they needed to find water straight away
Yeah.
to spew up their little babies, yeah, pretty cool.
The speaking of the alien thing that you said, I'm very curious about it because I was curious about whether that creature was actually evil or if it's just trying to communicate in some way. And it's very strange that they have planted that in my mind. Maybe the alien is working on me, that I had that expectation because even before when he was inside the sheep, I was wondering if it was trying to communicate in some way that might not be fully nefarious. Because here, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, I think it's still open to interpretation, but it seemed like when the tick came out of the bottle and it was tapping on the glass, it was like it was trying to get her attention, like to warn her. That's how I read it. But it is possible also, that's the other thing I thought, is like, is it somehow controlling the ticks remotely somehow? And then being able to help them get out of their cages. But then when it was like tapping on the glass, like urgently, it seemed like it was actually trying to get her attention. But maybe you're right. Maybe it was a distraction. And then in distracting her, the tick got to do its thing. But then it shuffled itself off the shelf. And more importantly, it seems to want to go after the alien. So there's some bad blood between these aliens, possibly.
Yeah, in the later scenes of the episode when it called the alien, or it seemed like it called the alien,
Mm-hmm.
and then attacked it. I mean, so awesome. But yeah, really speaks to we don't know what this alien is up to and whether it's going to help the humans or hinder them. And perhaps that's a key to what's going to happen on Earth later on.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's more interesting if it has its own agenda and it may just partner with the humans because it wants to kill the aliens. It may not be benevolent in any way, but it would be interesting if that was the case because at first I was a little confused to have all these predatory creatures. I'm like, which one are we supposed to be paying attention to? Like, there's too many creatures. But if they have their own agendas, now it starts getting a little more interesting.
Well, I really want to see this alien actually displace the eye of an alien and take control of it and see
That
what
would be
happens.
that might be the intention, although I don't know where their eyes are. It did go for the eyes, or at least go for the head in this episode, and that freaked out the alien. That got him. No, that made it. That's the only thing that got this thing to back off. But is this thing going to drill itself into Cavalier's head? That would be satisfying,
Yes.
possibly. So yeah, a lot of you see over and over again in this episode. If there's anything thematic, it is these flaws in these humans that someone even explicitly says it at one point that the alien creature, they say, well, those are the better life form, basically. And they say, think about us as humans, smart enough to build this ship, but too dumb to not fill it with these, creatures that can kill us.
Mm.
And that's, again, thematically what the alien films in general are about, but it's that open question again, because think about all the people here making terrible decisions, usually because of some emotional connection. And you could even say that about Morrow, that Morrow is now maybe doing something that could have disastrous consequences. We don't know yet for sure, but because of his need for revenge. And then of course you have the trying to save the kid, and in so doing killing off those, the two science officers on the ship. And just one bad decision after another, all made not for the pragmatic or logical reason, but made for usually an emotional reason. And the alien wins over and over again in all these films.
Over and over again. Yeah. I mean, I was just, when Morrow first found out that two of the crew were infected, and they said, oh, we just tried to cut the first alien's tail, and then that killed the captain. I was like, that's what you should do every time. Sacrifice the crew, kill the alien,
right?
And then they're not going to burst from the chest. Come on.
Exactly. If you just jettison those bodies out into space, everything would be okay. But they're trying to save them, and they're trying to contain a creature that they do not understand. Oh, an interesting thing we discover here, right? That was the idea all the way back in the first Alien film, by the way, is that Ripley says that they should freeze the body, and they're trying to rescue the John Hurt character. And then the creature falls off the face hugger, and they're like, oh, okay, he's normal. And then that's what leads to everything that happens after that. But she's like, we should freeze the body, cryogenically freeze the body, and to protect the crew. But if this is new canon, it wouldn't have helped, because these creatures, the chest burster is a freeze proof. Apparently, he's got antifreeze in its blood or something. And still pops out of that cryo chamber.
Yeah, it makes sense. They can float around in space and stay alive.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah.
Indestructible, like cockroaches. What did you think of when we see the engineer with the Eye-lien in his head? What did you think about that? It kind of fits in the socket, but not quite.
Oh my God. When it reached through his nose to pick up his lip, to have a smirk or a smile or an evil smile. I don't know what it was trying to do, whether it was trying to imitate what humans do. Just hilarious. What a fantastic moment.
Do you think, if we think about this creature as maybe not being predatory in some way, do you think that he came upon the body after it was dead? Because we did see it inside of like a dead cat body at one point. So I guess it can take over the nervous system of even a dead creature. Do you think he was dead already? Or do you think what do you think happens to the creature? Like if it comes out afterwards, is the person now okay, but with an eye missing, obviously? Or
That's right.
this, do you think that it's like it takes over everything, and like basically you're a corpse at that point, a zombie?
I don't know, but I would like to think that you just go back to being you, just eyeless. You've still got one eye, and you just feel a little bit like you've been assaulted by poor old Eye-lien. But I feel like I'd like to know that you just go back to being you. But I feel like the Eye-lien will kill you. Long way to, I don't know, a long way to say that they haven't given us that information, and I think it could be important towards the end.
The reason I ask all these questions is because I kind of like the Eye-lien, and I want him to be a good guy, and maybe someone has to lose an eye. I understand, but
Yes.
You can make prosthetic eyes in this world. I am sure they have replacement eyes here in this universe.
Exactly. I'd like to think that he's a good guy, or she. It's a she.
Or
I
she.
think they call her a she.
They do call her. Yeah.
And And I feel like, yeah, I just really want to know her motivations. And do we know where they got all these aliens from? Was it from a planet? Was it from an asteroid? And I really want to know how they interact together, because obviously the aliens were created as a weapon way back. If they're taking Prometheus
Oh, if you
into
buy into that.
account,
Okay.
yeah. But then these other aliens are not related to the xenomorphs at all, but they have similar characteristics in that they're completely deadly to humans. So I'd like to know a bit more about how they interact, and if they're friends, enemies, whatever's going on there. I'm interested.
I mean, that's actually an interesting point. I actually thought this was kind of like a gap in plot here or logic, that we're supposed to believe that theoretically the original alien mythology, they came upon this creature, they got the SOS, they just stumbled upon it. So that is believable. Now, in this particular case, it looks like this was the plan, was to go and retrieve these life forms, which maybe just some mining colony ran into them or something. So, okay, I'll buy that. But that then there's all these other species, and then I was thinking, what are they going from planet to planet finding these things? But you make a good point. Maybe on a particular location they were at, there are multiple species that maybe are at some kind of, imagine that the aliens came and like killed off the Eye-lien's entire species. It wants revenge too. Like Morrow and it maybe have the same agenda.
Yeah.
But a
That's cool.
different target, of course. But it all remains to be seen. Yeah, but I do hope they develop this character. I'd love to see it like start communicating. It may have to be pick a more something higher on the food chain than a sheep to be able to start communicating. I don't know how sheeps write or talk. That would be a little rough.
That's right, and also the leech character is getting developed further as well. We can see it have babies in the water. When you cut through it, it produces this kind of gas or pollen or something that is completely lethal, or we think is lethal to humans. So yeah, there's multiple layers with these new aliens that are going to play into the plot, I hope, down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I have some notes here at the very end, but before we get to the end, there's some other highlights here in the episode that I thought were worth discussing, which is one of the most shocking moments this is just pure visceral filmmaking, but there's this really amazing scene where we see, I have to pull up her name. Hold on a second. The acting captain, whose name was...
It's difficult when they bring in an episode with all new characters.
Right. Just for exactly.
Don't have the names of.
Zaverny, I think her name is, where she's the acting captain. She's on the security tape. We actually see that she's having sex with one of these guys who eventually, because of the fire set by the saboteur, gets the face hugger on his face. And there's a moment where we're intercutting the security footage, and then she is crying over his cryo chamber and putting these powder on top of it. I don't know what exactly that represented. I guess it's something between the two of them.
Oh, it was Earth from it had a label Utah.
Oh,
so
right.
It was soil from
home.
The state, from where yeah, exactly.
And that makes sense now. And we're intercutting that, and then we're intercutting her memory of the lovemaking, and then him witnessing it. But then there's this freaky scene where you see her on top of him, and she sits straight up, and we see the face hugger on his face already. And it freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, was she having sex with him when he had the face hugger on his face? I was like, what direction is this show going in? But all of that is just, obviously it was just for the shock effect, but it was, but really just
it worked, didn't it?
It did.
It
just hit me something viscerally. Just the idea that, of course, she's like picturing him like this, but then, of course, in an intimate moment, just earlier that day, and all that's happening in her head at the same time, and it was like, whoa. It really freaked me out, and I'm like, it worked. Like you said, I'm like, I don't know exactly what that all represented, but it worked. It just got under my skin.
I did like when Morrow was woken up by that young crew member, and he's like, oh yeah, there's been a fire, our navigation systems are ruined, a couple of aliens escaped, but this crewmate was having sex with the captain, and I've got it all on video, and she does it on top, and it's really interesting. Morrow's like, hold on, where are your priorities, mate?
I know the guy's like a young guy, but he was so irritating, but funny at the same time. Like when you actually listen to him when they're all sitting in the cafeteria, and if you just listen to what he's saying because they're all talking over each other, what he's saying is very funny, but at the same time so irritating that this guy is being so flippant in this particular circumstance.
Oh my God, I laughed. He went into a room. We've got to scan the area. And I thought he'd pick up like a scanner or something. He just picks up a chair, ready to just hit something.
Oh, and by the way, another just random note I had in here. I really liked the medic who looks like Oscar Isaac. This actor's name is Amir Boutros, but he's like a more Arabic looking Oscar Isaac guy. I wanted to see a little more of him. Unfortunately, he died pretty unceremoniously by the gas that got released by those ticks.
Yeah, he was good, and I enjoy that they're all smoking as well in the ship.
Yes,
and especially Morrow. I think it's a real nod. Morrow sucking on the cigar is a real nod to Ridley Scott as well, who I think is synonymous with that.
Always smoking a cigar. Oh, and this character, the mechanic who has the apprentice, the older one, very recognizable British actor, Michael Smiley, who's been in like all the Ben Wheatley films, if you've seen like Kill List and all of those Ben Wheatley films. But also even recently in the Bad Sisters series on Apple TV. So he's just working a lot. If you look at his IMDb, he's in everything. And here he is again for 1.5 episodes.
Yeah, fantastic voice on him and fantastic accent. I don't know what regional accent that is, but it's just delicious the way that he says his lines. I also enjoyed his relationship with the apprentice, and I liked that the apprentice was very young and he was using words that he doesn't know what they mean, and he's also doesn't know other words, and it's very interesting the way that he was navigating the English language as well. Just goes to the heart of these characters and the way they're developed. I think it makes you care for them.
Yeah, exactly. In a very short period of time to really, there's a lot of shorthand here. And of course there's the nostalgia for the Alien films in the past. So you can kind of map these characters onto certain types from some of the previous films.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
So there's some of that going on, but yeah, just the being able to feel that camaraderie of the characters in such a short period of time and really get to their plight, and like knowing, like when you watch a slasher film or something, but even more so really like seeing an Alien film is what it really comes down to, when there's that tipping point where one person is injured but he's not dead yet. Oh, now someone's actually dead, but we got it under control. And then kind of just seeing that cascade where it's just like, no, this is completely out of hand, and you just see how like there's nothing's under control. And it's so crazy. There's that moment in the lab where they've just at that point lost 2 of their crewmates right before their eyes, and you hear screams from someone else being killed, and the alien drops down behind. That's a very cool scene. By the way, the practical alien again in full body here, really so cool. Yeah. And even when you see him like running down the hallway, that's not a CGI effect. It's probably, he's probably like on cables and, basically running along the walls of a rigged set. But so cool to just see this being done practically.
Oh, it's stunning, isn't it? And I'm sure they augment it with CG of the stuff dripping. He's always dripping, these aliens, and
of course.
But yeah,
there's so chains hanging down, of course, as well.
Oh, so many chains. There's a bit of a couple of little fake outs with the chains, wasn't there? With
exactly.
The shadows, yeah, and we love all that. I really like the shot of this female crew member who we don't know her name. The camera kind of pushes in on her and then goes above her as the alien comes into view. It's just so freakish, so awesome.
So this actress, by the way, her name, the character's name is Zaverny.
Okay.
And the actress's name is Richa Morjani. And she was, of course, in the most recent season of Fargo as the sheriff in that show. Have you seen the most recent season of the one with John Hamm?
No, I haven't. I think I fell out of Fargo with the Ewan McGregor season. But yeah, really enjoyed the first couple of seasons. Absolutely.
I've only seen season 1, 2, and now 5. I recommend you could just go straight to 5. You don't have to. You can skip the others. Okay. But it is one of the stronger seasons for sure. But you get to see her in every episode, just so you know. He's got a little stable of character actors now at this point. Okay, so here's the thing I was going to say about this making the fans happy, but maybe, especially given the show we have now, like I honestly loved all this stuff on the ship. And we'll get to the final scene, which kind of brings us back to the contemporary moment. But I really missed, now I want to know what's happening on that island with those android people and everything that's happening there. So two things. One is like this couldn't have been, and one argument is this couldn't have been the pilot episode of the show because then you would introduce these people, then the ship would crash in episode 2 or 3 or whatever, and then they'd all be wiped out. And I guess that would be kind of a twist, but I don't know if people will be satisfied with that. But what I was thinking is you can imagine a season 1 of the show where you're on the ship and you have a more traditional storyline and things start to unravel and you see that Cavalier and there's a sabotage and you can have a mystery that goes out for the whole season, like who's the saboteur. And then, eventually things get worse. And then you can imagine it's partially contained at one point. And then, they have a full breach or maybe somebody, the saboteur is able to release the aliens into general population. And then the ship crashes where it does. So you can imagine this thing. And then that is all set up for like a season 2 where they're on. And then we have the basic season now. So you can imagine that they had expanded this concept. They could have actually had a whole season of this before they had a season 2 and just introduce some of those characters. Maybe like you find out that there's these people on Earth and find out, they're communicating with them, some of these characters that'll turn up later on. But, there is like a whole story where the saboteur talks about how part of the reason that he's turned against the company is that I guess his girlfriend or his wife or whoever it was had, he just says these creatures laid eggs in her eyes. So apparently one of these creatures or some other evil creature that they tried to capture killed off this crew member or potential lover. So he's had this, and this is what kind of turned him, but we didn't see any of that once again, right? So you can imagine a more traditional alien show that has them on the journey goes wrong and they crash land onto Earth and then that becomes season 2. So it would work in that way. Maybe that would make people happy, but then why call it Alien Earth? Yeah. So,
well, it really could work that way. You make a good point. But I think that's why this episode is so successful because you've got a whole film or a whole season of a show crammed into this episode right. With all these characters we're never going to see again, we think. And it works so well. There's so much going on. There's so much action. There's so many push and pulls that that's why it was thrilling to me because it was so short and it just so impactful.
Yeah, it is fun to imagine that, like everything I just said, that, yeah, maybe that was originally how they had laid out this 2 or 3 season arc for this show. And then, as they were breaking the story, they're like, hey, let's just jump right into season 2 and then and like you said, maybe that's why there's this richness to the, this backstory where you kind of imagine like, well, maybe this is what happened. Maybe this is what happened because there is like a version of the story where those things happened, but they're just happening off screen or implied. And like you said, it's kind of what you do with a movie, right? Where you don't have the space to make a whole TV series. You have a movie and the audience has to do the work of filling in the gaps of how they got to this point. So that's why really this episode, like you mentioned, functions like a movie because it's like, yeah, you have to imply the relationship between these characters and their backstory and what this mission was in the first place. And maybe we will find those things out. But like you said, it's like this perfect little capsule episode that gives you hints of all that stuff. And once again, does an incredible job of fleshing out Morrow's actual backstory. So you understand him. All of a sudden, you look at Morrow and you're like, man, I hope he kills, I still want to protect the kids on that island. And hopefully he does think about that. But yeah, go kill Cavalier, man. If we had any reason to have any loyalty to this guy or any concern for, that he's not 100% bad guy, well, this guy's like number 1 on the hit list right now.
Mate, the only downer for this episode was when Boy Cavalier came into it. I was like, fuck, we can't avoid this guy. I
But
felt like they could do it a little bit more subtly than just have him
right.
expressly there. And we're like, all right, so he is the reason that this ship crashed in the city that he owns.
Right.
And I did think it was interesting that Morrow never heard of Prodigy, never
Right.
heard of them.
Mhm.
So now they're on his hit list.
It's interesting that this saboteur apparently knew about this new project that they were doing at Prodigy because he says, I want a new body. That's what I want if I give you these things. Because apparently he knows that they've been working on that. And meanwhile, like you said, that you actually have Morrow, who's just like, who's that? So kind of two extremes there on that knowledge of that. But we do see Morrow, of course, now in the present tense at the end of the episode. He's met with Yutani, this crazy set design. It made me think of the Predator, the Killer of Killers. Is that what that movie was called? But
Yeah.
the some of the Japanese style imagery from that particular that
Yeah,
one story. Yeah, set
I
in,
like Utani. I think she looks really cool. I want to see more of her and less of Cavalier.
I think we're going to see more of Yutani. And hey, by the way, Yutani in the end kind of wins this thing, right? Because we know they're in all these other Alien films.
That's right. Yeah.
But yes, so I found it very interesting where she's like, "Oh, we've negotiated something," and you were very happy with this, I'm sure. Where we've negotiated something, we've come to an agreement. Don't worry, we have a financial agreement with him. You don't have to do anything else to kill him. We'll get those eggs back. We have our own plan. And he's like, "Nope, I'm going to get those eggs back, and I'm going to kill him." She's just like, whatever he asks for, just you give him whatever he asks for. So you're like, "All right, let's do it. Let's do this thing."
Yeah, right. So she actually believes the lawyers are getting involved and are gonna satisfy this situation. I don't think so.
Right. So I guess she can just say, "Hey, you run with this," and she can keep, negotiating in public while some of this nefarious plot is hatched in the background.
Yep, cool.
And of course,
And
we
then
end
we
with
get
Smashing Pumpkins.
yeah, I was gonna say Smashing Pumpkins. Yep. So my brother-in-law Coda, shout outs to Coda from Sydney. He's watching this show and he's listening to our recaps, and he reckons Nine Inch Nails is going to be coming up very shortly in the next couple of episodes. But yeah, today we get Smashing Pumpkins. Okay, all right, not as heavy as the rest of the tracks, but possibly, definitely the same era as what we're feeling.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I still think your Rage Against the Machine pull was is definitely. I can't imagine that's not going to be. Maybe they're saving that for the season finale. So 3 more episodes. Do you have any speculation on where we'll go next episode? I mean, I think we're just going to continue. Morrow's plan is going to continue to move forward, right?
Well, it's very interesting because, I mean, I was so into this episode and thinking about last episode, which is a bit of a downer for me. We're definitely going back to Earth, and we're going back to these characters, Wendy and the Lost Boys. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, we're fully on Morrow's side now. So I want a Morrow heavy Earth episode where he can infiltrate Cavalier's operation and stir up some trouble.
And you know that means that Morrow and Kirsch are going to have their day.
Oh, do you know what? I forgot about Kirsch. How good is Kirsch?
Right.
Yep. Morrow and Kirsch, bring them back together and let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that is the real final battle, the royale between the two of them, where Kirsch knows exactly what's going on. He probably knows that Morrow's on his way there to the island, and he probably is not going to tell Cavalier about it.
He's not. I think he welcomes the chaos, doesn't he?
Yeah. Or he has a bigger agenda that he thinks that, I think the battle might be for the kids themselves. And while the island's overrun by aliens, maybe Kirsch escapes with the kids.
And I wonder if the Eye-lien can have any control over the hybrids. It's interested in one of the hybrids. I wonder if it's interested in Kirsch at all, because I think the Eye-lien's going to come into it. I did like the shot. Did you notice the shot of the eyeball crawling over the camera lens in one of the shots of this episode? I just thought that was just neat. Just a neat little thing. More eyeball.
Yeah. So we'll probably have less action-packed episode next week. But you know that all hell is going to break loose on the island. And if people want more action, there's only 3 episodes left. So if not next week, then I think the week after that is going to be pretty chaotic. So, yeah, very much looking forward to it. I honestly don't know. I usually can see how all the pieces are coming together this late in the season. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how it all comes together.
Well, that's a good sign. When you don't know what's going on, that's a really good sign, Victor, because usually you're a step ahead of all of us.
I don't, I mean, I do try to be. I was going to say I don't try to be, but that's not true. I do actually try to predict a little bit. So, yeah, everybody, as I mentioned, do stay tuned. The box office breakdown is coming right after this conversation ends. And Darren, can't wait to have this conversation with you next week. Oh, and one more thing I want to bring up is we discussed it briefly offline, but Task is coming to HBO this week. We will be covering it. Sona and I will be covering it on Monday. I believe there'll be an episode we will publish discussing the first episode of this alternate version of Dope Thief. Very similar plot, by the way, to Dope Thief. But I have a feeling we might stick to this one rather than giving up on Dope Thief.
Well, look, I've been following a couple of reviews and it's getting solid reviews. And I think one of them mentioned Heat as a reference, and I'm like all over that. So yeah, Mark Ruffalo in a Heat type TV series, bring it on.
Yeah, this will be very intriguing. So stay tuned for that starting on Monday. And we have a very busy month yet to come after Alien Earth ends. We have probably have maybe 3 shows that we'll be covering at the same time. So I'll have more information on all of that. But Dexter Resurrection finale on Friday. Everybody stay tuned for that. And then, of course, Sunday night or Monday, expect to see that recap of Task as well. All right, Darren, thanks again for the conversation.
Thanks so much, Victor. Talk to you next week.
Take care. Okay, here are the box office winners and losers of the summer of 2025. In the winners column, live action remakes of animated movies. I know you're sick of these, everybody. I'm sick of them too, and I haven't even seen these movies. But Lilo and Stitch, the remake of the 2002 animated movie, made over $1 billion at the worldwide box office. And you know the originals and its sequels, and I think there was a short run animated series are getting tons of streams on Disney+. There's merchandising. My daughter had a Stitch doll before this movie even came out when she was just a little kid, hadn't even seen the movie yet, and she already owned that merchandise. So Disney made a killing on this one. And that's not the only one this summer. How to Train Your Dragon, the remake of the 2010, from what I've heard, almost scene for scene remake of the 2010 animated film, which I saw in the movie theaters with my nephews, and I love that animated movie, and yet chose not to see this. But guess what? This one made almost $650 million worldwide, and I'm sure there's the original series got a boost, the animated films. There's been many Netflix, there's a multiple Netflix spin-off series as well, animated series. The catalog has become much more valuable. And of course, there is merchandising opportunities as well. And I love that first film, but really had no reason to see this one. But once again, it made a fortune. Not as well as Lilo and Stitch, but still. And what does this mean? We're going to see more of these, everybody. And they're not going to be Snow White, which of course was a big flop this year. But even those older remakes, whether it's 101 Dalmatians or whether it is Cinderella from more than a decade ago, it's not the older films that these kids want to see remakes of. It is the more recent titles. Moana's getting one. So if you don't think it's going to be that recent, that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's going to happen more and more. And it's not only going to be the Disney properties. Don't be surprised at all if a lot of these other DreamWorks animated films from just the past 20 years or so get live action remakes. Winner number 2, Jurassic World, an incredibly resilient franchise. This is a franchise that has done incredibly well in Asia. I'll get into this breakdown a little bit more later, but the Asian box office region, I should say, has been relatively disinterested in American products since the pandemic. It's gotten worse and worse every year, and a general anti-American sentiment overseas made it more prevalent, even more so this particular year. But that tide is not turning around, and by the way, has been continuing for over a decade now anyway. And yet, Jurassic World, which was so reliant on that money, continues to be a massively successful international worldwide sensation. And of course, has a franchise also, many films now that are all generating money and lots of merchandising opportunities, and animated spin-off series, etc. Another massive win for Universal here. This franchise has incredible legs, and amazing that this thing just keeps going and going. I guess kids just love seeing dinosaurs. And also, something you may see as a trend line here, putting stars into franchise films. I think part of the reason this film did so well is you put Scarlett Johansson in there, you put Mahershala Ali in there. It gives the whole thing more respectability. It's also really incredibly well made, beautiful to look at. Get a talented director, and it's not even like this is built into some large trilogy that they're setting up. This is really just a one-off adventure film, and it worked. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is something they continue to do. And maybe they seed a little mythology in there, but they don't even need to do that anymore. A huge win. And that's also the second biggest film of the year with almost $900 million at the worldwide box office. All right, winner number 3, Apple TV, Warner Brothers. A lot more to talk about Warner Brothers, which had a great summer. Brad Pitt. I'm talking about F1. And F1 is a big winner here too. Now, the profits on this film are relatively small because it costs so much money to make, but Apple TV needed a hit. They needed a film that prove out that the money they've been spending on these movies is worth it, and they've made some pretty expensive films that were disasters. This one cost more than some of the biggest disasters they've had recently. I won't even name them all, but this was a hit, and there's a lot of money-making opportunity here. You think about F1, even when you watch this movie, they were not paid by these sponsors, but F1 is nothing but putting advertisements on these cars. The advertising is baked into the film, and they had to ask permission. Hey, F1, can we use this? Hey, can we use your logos on these cars? The next one's going to be the exact opposite. People will be jockeying to advertise their watches and their vodka and their electronics in the next film, although Apple will probably be all Apple, of course. So this thing's going to be a big hit. Also proves that Brad Pitt, again, maybe the bigger star now than he ever was when he was younger. So continues to be one of our biggest stars. Okay, the next category, these are kind of losers. These are actually some of the highest grossing films of the year, but they're kind of losers. And they are the comic book films that came out this year. We have, from the bottom up, Thunderbolts, less than $400 million worldwide. Fantastic Four, about $550 million worldwide. And Superman with almost $625 million worldwide. Those are my estimates where the box office is going to wind up, by the way, in case you want to compare this. No need to do so. Compare this to one of these box office websites. These are estimates. But regardless of where those numbers are, slightly higher, slightly lower, this does not bode well for what used to be the event of each summer, these giant comic book movies. They can still work, by the way. Deadpool and Wolverine came out last summer, made a $1.3 billion, but that's almost like a satire on how badly the comic book industry has become as far as the movies go in the past few years. Because Thunderbolts is a really good movie with really good word of mouth from fans, great reviews from critics, and I think it's one of the best MCU films they've made. And yet, once it got beyond the core comic book diehards, they could not attract the general audience. So I feel like there's almost like there was a default within the movie-going public that you just had to see them. There was just such big news, you just had to see that movie. The next Marvel, the next DC, maybe not so much the DCs, but maybe the next Marvel for sure. And that just simply has gone away because even the good ones cannot attract an audience. It also doesn't help that these characters in these latest films are really not the most popular. And honestly, since the Avengers Endgame film, they simply have not been able to kick off new characters that have any kind of real stickiness with the public. And films they've put out with the legacy characters are, once again, probably the B-list, even of the original Avengers. So lots of trouble. It's not really working. But that's the Thunderbolts. How about Fantastic Four? Sure. Made well over $100 million more. And the budget on the film was only about the same as it was for Thunderbolts. Great reviews, great audience reaction, family friendly, which always works well in the summer. And yet this definitely underperformed. But it's what's most worrisome is that even after a strong opening weekend, it seemed like there was just a drop off week to week. There was an expectation that the film would find an audience going forward, but it didn't happen. People simply did not recommend this to their friends, or if they did, whoever they're recommending it to was just like, I think I'm done with the comic book films. And I think that's an attitude that is prevalent here. And that's why we're seeing these drop off in the box office of these films. And of course, the most successful of them was the Superman film. In the US, a real solid hit, considering where the DCU was at. This reboot from James Gunn, good reviews, good audience reaction, very strong audience reaction. I wasn't a huge fan of this film personally, by the way. And cheaper than the most recent DC films, so they were able to constrain their expense. But overseas, not a big hit. And this is also a trend line. Traditionally, you would see, for example, the second Ant-Man film, and I'm intentionally picking a not very famous or popular comic book character, made almost twice as much money overseas as it did in the US. And you see that also with the DC movies as well. But two big things have happened. One is that there's in general disinterest with the with the comic characters. I guess three things. Also a bit of a backlash against the United States in general and their films overseas. But most importantly is that trend line, that sinking box office from Asia. And I did a little comparison. The Ant-Man and the Wasp movie made $400 million overseas, whereas the Fantastic Four film is only going to make a little over $250 million overseas. Quite a drop-off. However, it only made $40 million in Asia, 40, compared to Ant-Man and the Wasp making well over $200 million in Asia, which is to say that in the rest of the world, the Fantastic Four film is actually a bigger hit, significantly larger than that Ant-Man film, but the total number looks so much smaller because the Asian market in general has turned its back on American content. A lot of it is because their local content has gotten better, and some of it is just economic issues like South Korea, for example, is having a bit of an economic downturn in and of itself. But all that is to say that a big trend here, I believe, is that we're going to see that these films already are coming in at budgets $50 million less, $100 million less than they were on some of their previous comic book iterations. It was normal, for example, to see MCU films with $250, $280 million budgets. Now you're seeing Thunderbolts, for example, at $180 million. And the same thing with Superman coming in at $225, whereas even Man of Steel from more than a decade ago cost almost $300 million for that film. So those budgets might have to come down even more to make this reasonable, especially if these domestic and European audiences do not start pulling in the numbers that they did before the Marvel peak. Okay, we had some winners. We had kind of a loser. That's, these films are the highest grossing films of the year and still kind of in this gray area of how profitable they are. But a big shrug for a big trend this year, except for one exception, by the way, of long dormant franchise reboots. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Nobody cared. The Karate Kid Legends. Nobody cared. 28 years later. Pretty good opening weekend, but a terrible multiplier. Did not connect with mainstream audiences and only did a little better than break even, but at least profitable. And even the ones that are kind of hits, the Naked Gun reboot, very entertaining, by the way, but only made about $100 million. These are the type of films that could make a lot more money later. Also, relatively small budget. So it was profitable, but no guarantee that we'll see more Naked Gun films. I hope they do make them, though. A lot of fun to see this dumb comedy with people laughing. Just so many jokes packed in there. Audience really loving it. And of course, maybe the biggest of all these hits is Freaky Friday, a big comeback, obviously, for Lindsay Lohan and the continued success of Jamie Lee Curtis and her star power, but only made about, unadjusted for inflation, about the same as the original back in 2003 or whenever it was. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. We saw Mean Girls get a reboot, although not with the same cast, just last year, to see films from that era getting sequels or reboots. But even this isn't a phenomena, but a solid hit. And that's about as good as you can get in this category, except for one exception, which goes into another winners category here. Oftentimes a winner, almost every single year. Horror is a winner. And horror is a winner again this year, especially big budget horror, or bigger budget considering these budgets. Warner Brothers, again, having a banner year, had Final Destination Bloodlines, a very old franchise that got a reboot. So it definitely fits into the previous category. This one is a huge success. Even when you adjust for inflation, none of the previous Final Destination films made this kind of money. It's still making money overseas, a huge hit. It'll probably only grow on home video. And I guess just after a generation of people growing up knowing what Final Destination is, even if they've never seen the movie, you just know the concept of it. And I guess it all paid a huge dividend this year. Plus, it's a really fun movie. I think it's just very well made. So even after the opening weekend, there was good word of mouth. People kept showing up to see it. It's a lot of fun. And this is definitely going to be a franchise that Warner Brothers wants to extend. And Warner Brothers, again, another relatively big budget, big risk when you consider the kind of money they spent on weapons, $38 million. Barbarian, which was Zach Cregger's previous film, the writer-director of Weapons, only made about that much money worldwide. But he got the money together, and it was worth every penny. A huge word-of-mouth hit. It will also make around $300 million, also from Warner Brothers, by the way. And Warner Brothers, again, having a bigger budget film just this very weekend to see if they can extend this Conjuring franchise even further. So this modest but bigger budget horror films from a large studio worked this summer, but smaller budget horror worked as well. We have Together and Bring Her Back, both from two different indies, Neon and A24, on a modest budget, making solid profits, and the type of film that will only grow once it comes to the home market. Okay, the next category is, did we really need that sequel? And I have 3 films in this category. One is Nobody 2, which, did we really need that sequel? I really liked Nobody, the first one, which I just saw recently. And this one's actually making more money than that film that came out during the pandemic. More box office, but also bigger budget, bigger advertisement. So it probably won't lose any money, but I doubt we're going to see Nobody 3, unless it goes straight to streaming or something. And in this category, we also have 2 duds. Ballerina, which is kind of a prequel more than it is a sequel, but an extension of the John Wick universe, and this did not work. They tried to fix the film, they spent more money on it, reshot most of it, and they probably should have released the lower scale version of it because it probably would have grossed the same amount of money. This is a really odd one, by the way, because anecdotally, it seems that the audiences really loved this film, and they did not turn out for it. After the first weekend, it just dropped off. Without Keanu, maybe this franchise just doesn't work. We might see this ballerina character in another John Wick film, however, Ana de Armas. By the way, I wasn't a huge fan of this film, and I thought the selling point here was Ana de Armas was so great in that James Bond film, having so much fun as this new 00, and I wanted to see more of that, not this dour, depressed assassin. Or I guess she's a bodyguard, which still ends up killing many, many people. Anyway, it didn't really work for me. Apparently, didn't work for a lot of people, even though supposedly audiences liked it. I don't know. Doesn't look like they did to me. Speaking of, I did like Megan 2.0, in a large part because it was so different from the previous Megan. But in the category of did we need this sequel, the world said no. Nobody cared. It wasn't a hit here, wasn't a hit overseas. They changed genres. They were trying to be maybe a little too clever. They went from this AI comedy / slasher movie to an action film, very much trying to do the Terminator 2 thing. I thought this was very fun, very funny, and very clever, but I'm in the minority. People hated this film, and I guess they did a terrible job marketing it because it didn't even open well. It's not like the word of mouth was toxic. It's like nobody even showed up on opening weekend. So sequels, we didn't want. At least that film is cheap enough where it's probably not going to lose much money. It might even become a cult hit in the long run. But they have already made a sidequel, like in the universe of Megan film, which is coming out in 2026. So I don't know if that's going to work unless they somehow try to distance themselves completely from the Megan franchise. Okay, the next movie I wanted to discuss briefly is a sequel. Yes, we did want this sequel, but maybe not this sequel. And that is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This film made about $600 million worldwide, but it cost at least $375 million. It's been production on and off for years. These films are insanely expensive and only become more expensive. But if we assume like an extra $100 million from Asia, this actually performs approximately where the other Mission Impossible films have done. The question, of course, is if this really is the finale for Tom Cruise in this series, then that's obviously a disappointment. They obviously were expecting more when you see how much these films cost. And the last one is a little disappointing. This one even more so, I think, and audiences felt the same way. It does have an incredible stunt in it, definitely worth seeing just for that final stunt. But this franchise pretty much going out with a whimper rather than a bang, which unfortunately probably means that Cruise is going to try to come back one more time. And honestly, I want him to move on to something else. This is a guy who used to work with only A-list directors. He worked with Michael Mann. He worked with Steven Spielberg. He worked with Stanley Kubrick. He worked with P.T. Anderson. He was collecting Ridley Scott, Tony Scott, Martin Scorsese, of course. It seemed like he was collecting all of his iconic directors. He got one of each trading card. And then he just started making these movies that were very reliant on stunts and playing this like never aging superhero There's some great films in there, especially the Mission Impossibles at their best, but time for him to move on to something else. And maybe the box office is saying as much. Without him, would these movies make as much money? Certainly not. Would they cost significantly less? Probably as well. So maybe he can be in there as the elder statesman in the series, reluctantly, angrily, not being able to be out in the field. Could be an interesting reversal, but would he be willing to do that? I don't know. But is it a money loser? No, just because the franchise itself will continue to make money. So this is just gravy at this point. There's so many of these films. Every time one of these comes out, you probably see them all over the streaming charts, all over the rental charts. That's all money that's being made from this long legacy of this franchise, which of course includes, owned by Paramount, the original Mission Impossible TV series as well. Okay, lastly, we'll get to our biggest surprises and the biggest loser. The biggest loser of the year is Pixar and its film Elio. This film cost at least $175 million. Some people claim it cost way over $200 million, almost $300 million. And it's unfortunate because I think it's a pretty solid film. And Pixar's going to do fine. They have Toy Story 5 coming out. They just had the highest grossing animated film of all times, with an asterisk there, English language anyway, with Inside Out 2. But the sad fact is that Inside Out 1, the first film, would never get a green light today because films like Elio that are not based on any kind of IP, not based on not a franchise, not a sequel, not a reboot of some kind, people simply don't turn out to see it. So on the one hand, Pixar's already been saying that I guess we just have to make sequels forever, which is very sad when you consider some of those incredible originals Pixar made. But another one of the kind of winners this year were cheap animation. Kids are coming out to see movies in theaters. The Smurfs film did not make as much money as they had hoped for. And the Smurfs, of course, has been a hugely popular franchise in the past, and this film alone will rejuvenate it to some extent. But something that doesn't have a long franchise history, The Bad Guys, which has Bad Guys 2 came out this year, only made about as much money as the first Bad Guys movie, around $200 million. They were expecting more, considering the first one came out during the pandemic. But on a budget made for $80 million, this thing is profitable, and we will see more Bad Guys, maybe not movies in the Cineplex, but on TV, miniseries, a Netflix special, etc. We'll see more Bad Guy stuff because it's made on a budget. So maybe, here's my advice to Pixar. Not that they care, but here's my advice. Don't give up on making original films. All these sequels, Pixar sequels, are of course based on original Pixar films. So we need those to be able to create new sequels. So don't spend $300 million on original or non-IP content. Have those giant lavish budgets for the guaranteed blockbusters and have, like, internally a startup on a budget. Don't spend 3 years making these movies. Maybe the polish of the animation isn't quite Pixar level. And I know they would think that is scuffing their brand, but I'd argue that spending $300 million on a film that no one goes and sees is possibly even worse, and that will bankrupt you. By the way, Pixar still has it, I think. I haven't shouted this out on the podcast at all, but I want to bring it up. Their series, Win or Lose, from Disney Plus this year, it's really terrific. It's one of my favorite conceits in storytelling. It tells you the same event from different protagonists' point of view in each and every episode. When this premiered, they were showing 2 perspectives and 2 episodes individually per week until they finished the entire series. Now the whole thing's available to watch. I highly recommend it. I loved watching this with my daughter. She's of an age now where the lesson of the series really resonated with her. Almost to an episode of that show, a particular character would be the antagonist from the perspective of the POV that we're actually seeing in that story. But then in the next episode, or maybe 2 episodes later, but usually just the very next episode, that person, their antagonist, becomes the protagonist. And then we see that they aren't just bad or just doing something to be cruel to this other person, but that they have their own dramas that they're dealing with. And then they have an antagonist. And of course, that antagonist has their own backstory. And it's all around this softball game. So if you saw the promo for this and thinking, wow, that's pretty weird, this is just a softball game from different characters' POVs, it is that, but it's a lot more than that. Really excellent. That's the type of thing, honestly, that would have been like an Inside Out-like movie years ago, and now it goes straight to Disney Plus. And in some ways, maybe that is where some of the creativity from Pixar is going, but we can still see these originals in the movie theater. Once again, if Elio had cost a third of what it cost, it would need to make $500 million to break even. As far as the positive surprises for the year, Weapons, of course, as I mentioned before, and Final Destination can go in that overperforming surprise as well. And one more overperformer, The Materialist from A24. I don't think anyone was really expecting this to become a huge hit, but on modest expectations, didn't even have a very wide opening. This weird film that is trying to be a rom-com and deconstructing a rom-com at the same time. Not fully successful, as far as I'm concerned, but maybe there's just such an appetite for romantic comedies. Even something that looked like one ended up becoming a hit in the US, but a much bigger hit overseas. A huge hit, making well over $100 million worldwide, and still doing very well overseas. So is that just seeing stars in a rom-com or in a romance in general? That's probably what it is. And Hollywood should probably take the lesson that we need more of them in general. Because this film, I guess on the one hand, really doesn't give you what you want as far as a rom-com very intentionally. But that kind of became a talking point where people had to see the film and have an opinion about it. So that's something that can still work. Doesn't always work. It's a little bit more of a risk. But I think the easy thing here is make more romantic films, more rom-coms. People obviously are thirsting for them. And that's not everything that came out this summer. Of course, there's other films, mostly smaller ones that I didn't really cover here. And I didn't even talk about the things that came out. It's kind of too early to tell to see how, for example, Caught Stealing, The Roses. I don't think any of these films are really going to do that well. They came out over Labor Day weekend. Caught Stealing might catch a little traction. It's a good starring vehicle for Austin Butler. I think that film mostly works, but I understand why they kind of buried it at the end of the summer. It'll probably be on home video in 2 or 3 weeks, most likely. I found it entertaining. I think it's really well made, a lot of fun to watch. I have some problems with a plot twist that happened, not a twist, but an event that happens about halfway through the film. Minus that, it's a blast. And maybe it could have been a bigger hit if it had opened earlier in the summer. Oh, and of course, a big trend line here, just to talk about general trends. Budgets have to get smaller, first of all. If that money is not coming back from Asia, and if for some of these massively budgeted blockbusters, they have to start changing the type of films they're making. But what is that going to be if they change it? I think we're going to see a lot more films purely marketed towards kids, which seems to be what is working. Maybe more rom-coms as well. Maybe more reboots of things from a decade or two ago that have a strong female appeal. Like, for example, the Freakier Friday, definitely a hit. More horror films. But are we going to have more films that cater to middle-aged folks like me and Darren and Sona and most of you out there based on the demographics that I see on the podcast dashboard? We, unfortunately, are not going to theaters. I am, but we collectively are not going to theaters as much as we did before. So if we want to see those films in theaters, you guys, you're going to have to go and see them in the theaters. It's the only way they'll keep making more of them. All right, that's the roundup. Maybe next week I'll have some bonus content around the Emmy nominations, or as we're approaching the Emmy Awards, or maybe talk about what I'm anticipating, the buzz coming out of the film festivals, or maybe both of those things. Stay tuned for all of that. I'll talk to you soon.